Hi, this is Dylan, and this is Parent Creature Conference. Miss Summers had conducted hundreds of PT meetings over the years. They were one of her guilty pleasures. She liked to call herself an investigator. Everyone else just called her nosy. She was especially curious about Jasper. She didn't know much, only that he had 5 parents that swapped custody every few weeks. Something interesting was here. She could feel it. She finished tidying up her colorful little classroom, making sure it looked every bit as welcoming and cheerful as she could make it. Finally, she sat and waited for Jasper's family to arrive.
I don't see why he still needs to go to physical education. I have already bestowed the unholy strength of Lucifer upon him,
griped Asmodeus, blood lord of the 9 hells, dealer of souls and traitor to God. He was sitting scrunched in a tiny plastic chair, which would have seemed much larger had anyone else been sitting in it, and he was repeatedly clicking a ballpoint pen in his talons.
"Oh, yes, and we all know how that turned out, don't we?"
came the voice of Gertrude, the oldest of the 3 hags.
"Satan's blood gives physical strength, sure, but it also gives you a bloody peanut allergy. Seriously, how careless can you be?"
The silent figures of Gilda and Gwen nodded along behind her. The demon, never one to let an insult go unavenged, unfurled his blackened leather wings to their full extent and roared at the 3 witches, who barely moved except to wave the stench of his breath out of their faces. "Moms, Dads, can you guys stop fighting, please?" came the earnest little voice of Jasper. "You're scaring Miss Summers." The nightmarish quartet turned back to the quivering figure of Miss Summers, whose huge round glasses and unassuming presence gave her the look of a terrified field mouse. Sheepishly, the demon curled his wings back up and made a valiant effort to sit back in the chair before giving up and smashing it to pieces. "Okay, where were we?" squeaked Miss Summers. The rest of the meeting went surprisingly smoothly. If Miss Summers closed her eyes, she could almost pretend it was an ordinary family in front of her. As things began to come to a close, Miss Summers took a deep breath and finally asked the question that had been eating away at her this whole time. "If you wouldn't mind, I wanted to ask you about your custody situation and whether you believe it may impact your son's schoolwork."
"Oh, yes, reasonable question," said Gertrude. "That bastard of a father of his promised the soul of his firstborn to all 5 of us separately. There was a fiasco of supernatural paperwork when Jasper was born, but long story short, we all got joint custody of his soul."
Miss Summers didn't even know where to begin with that, so she asked the easiest question first. "Did you say 5? I don't see a 5th. Suddenly, Miss Summers felt paralyzed. Every hair on her neck stood up. An electric chill ran down her spine. Every instinct was telling her to run, to flee, but terror kept her completely immobile. She sat and watched as the lights in the room dimmed to a darkness that obscured everything but her. In the inky void, a long, thin sliver of glowing green light formed. With a sound like tearing flesh, the green rift of life pulled itself open to reveal the enormous, bloodshot eye behind it.
but I see you.
She could feel the years behind that voice, the endless eons stretching to the very dawn of time. This was something unknowable, so far beyond her that she could barely stand in its presence.
Now, about Jasper's grade in math.